Hello, and welcome to the Regional Association of West Quebecers Rock Talk series. In this series, we will welcome speakers from across the region to join us and present on various topics. The Rock Talk series is made possible under the Secretariat for Relations with English-Speaking Quebecers through the Community Health and Social Services Network and its Enhancing Regional Community Capacity Initiative. Today, we will hear from Linton Garner, the co-creator of the ABCs of Canadian Black History Kit.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Linton Garner, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about a subject which is near and dear to my heart. I am one of the co-creators of the ABCs of Canadian Black History Kit. Black history matters. It matters because it is Canadian history. That's why we have subtitled our project as A Journey of Discovery into Canadian History. I mentioned that I am the co-creator. The other one is Dr. Dorothy Williams. She's a professor at Concordia University, a historian. She's an author. She's written 2 books on Blacks in Montreal, and she is the founder of blackbiblio.com. As for myself, I'm a longtime community organizer, having worked on a variety of social issues from intercultural and interracial relations, linguistic minority issues, health, welfare, education as well. And I have been working with Dr. Williams to be able to get this educational kit introduced into schools across the country. Now, I think it's important that we understand a few things about the demographics of the Canadian Black community. Since 2000, our community has doubled to reach about 1.2 million people, representing 3.5% of the total Canadian population. Our community is younger on average, and as well, over 26% of our community are 15 and under, as opposed to 16.9% of the majority population. Our seniors represent presently about 15.9% of all Canadians. Now, before 1981, the immigrants from Black countries were mainly from the Caribbean. As you can see, they were over 83%. But as of 2011, that flipped and changed around, where the African continent started to provide just over 65% of the Black immigrants to Canada, which at present means that we have over 170 countries of origin, 200 cultures and ethnicities represented, as well as 100 or more mother tongue languages spoken in our community. We are concentrated in many urban centers like Toronto and Montreal, followed by Ottawa-Gatineau. However, the largest increase in our population growth has been in the prairies, where we have quadrupled in size since 1996, and where we represent just over 175,000 members of the population. Now, most people believe that we arrived only during those immigration periods and that we haven't had a long history in Canada. Nothing could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, Matthew DaCosta, the first free Black man to come to Canada, came as the pilot, interpreter, and guide for Samuel de Champlain. He spoke Mi'kmaq as well, and which says to me that he probably was here many years before Champlain. He was a member of the Order of Good Cheer, which was the group of those people who spent that very first winter here in Canada and in Port Royal, which is where Champlain established his city, which now we know has become Quebec City. However, the first slave didn't arrive here until 1628 in the form of a young boy by the name of Olivier Lejeune, who had been sold to the Couillard family by the Kirk brothers, who were privateers from France, who then sold him to Father Lejeune, where he became Olivier Lejeune. However, it is important to note, as slavery spread across the territory, all the way through to Detroit, as a matter of fact, 2/3 of all slaves in Canada were Indigenous people, not Blacks. However, the influx of our community really began in 1775 when the United Empire Loyalists returning to Canada or the British territories after the defeat in the American Revolutionary War brought 3,000 blacks with them to Nova Scotia, which represented about 10% of all Loyalists. The blacks came with the Loyalists because they were promised that if they fought on the side of the British, they would be freed. And then if they came with them north to Nova Scotia, that they would be given land. And only actually about 500 of them were given any land. However, the expansion of the territory also brought blacks with them, and as they moved westward, they established a settlement near Buxton, Ontario, called the Elgin Settlement, and it attracted more than 2,000 ex-slaves to that community. It was a community where blacks could finally own their own homes, businesses, run their own churches, and develop their own churches, and as a matter of fact, also establish educational institutions, which is very important to slaves who were prohibited from learning when they were slaves in the United States. At the present time, our community is still underrepresented or overrepresented in certain categories. In terms of the employment rate, we are still lagging behind the majority community. And in terms of our post-secondary educated members, we are unemployed at a rate that's practically 2 times that of the general population. 21% of our population live under the poverty line, as opposed to 12% for the general population, and approximately 27% of all black children live in the poverty line as well, as opposed to 14% of the general population. 34% of all our households are two-parent families, which is really comparative to the majority community. However, 19% versus 8% of our community are single-parent families. 70% of all black single-parent families are women, and 34% of black single parents are likely to be living in poverty. Our kit contains 26 lessons in 7 categories. We have a person, place, or event of historical significance in each letter of the alphabet. And we've categorized them into arts and sciences, politics, the military, geography or places, pioneers, human rights, and sports. The stories that we begin to tell in terms of the timeline begin with Olivier Lejeune, since he was the first recorded slave in Canada. But even then, he knew that despite the fact that he was baptized and despite the fact that he was the first student in Quebec, that wouldn't change matters, because he said to Father Lejeune that baptism will not improve my plight, for I'll still be black while you are white. And that still somehow remains the same today. The next letter we chose to show you today is C is for the Code Noir. Now, the Code Noir was something surely that was put together by functionaries or who decided that they were going to create a manual for slaves and give them to the slave owners to be able to conduct the rules of how blacks were to be treated, how their slaves were to be treated, and it was everything from what kind of work they could do, what kind of responsibilities they could have, who they could marry, etc. Who worked where. All of that was designed to control the slaves and keep them under control. And as it says here, from the cradle to the grave. Now, Rose Fortune is one of my favorite stories because she became Canada's first policewoman, actually, and probably the first black police person in Canada. She was a business person who worked in Annapolis Royal. She had a carting business, and she would cart things from the uh, the wharf into the city. You know, both goods and people. And it became pretty dangerous. So she petitioned uh, her fellow merchants and the city of Annapolis Royal to be able to patrol the wharf to keep their businesses safe. And she was granted that and did that for a long period of time. And during that period, you know, her business thrived, and actually it stayed in her family right through to the 1980s, and it rivals the Mosons as one of the longest uh, running family-owned businesses in the history of the country. But she also wasn't finished there. One of her great-great-grandnieces became the first black woman to be a mayor of a major urban center when she became mayor of that same Annapolis Royal. Mifflin Mr. Gibbs should be considered one of our fathers of Confederation. He was a black man that was from the United States that was invited to the British Columbia territories by then Governor James Douglas, who was also black. He invited black business persons to come and start to develop commerce in the region because he knew that blacks in the United States were not getting a fair shake and weren't able to establish businesses on their own in the United States. So he recruited them to come north. And in Mifflin Gibbs, he found a jewel. Mr. Gibbs founded a mine, a railway, became a city councilor in the city of Victoria, and he also developed a retail store which became the groundwork or the foundation for the Eaton stores. But he wasn't finished there either. He went to a convention called the Yale Convention, which was a convention that was brought together to decide whether the British Columbia Territory and other Western territories would stay in Canada or join the Canadian Federation or join the United States. And after a couple of days and some impassioned speeches by people that were, conjoining or encouraging them to join the United States, Mr. Gibbs stood up and, unplanned, gave a 10-minute speech that changed the whole theme of the convention, and they started and decided to stay in Canada. So Mr. Gibbs actually is a father in Confederation, or else your country might look very different than it looked today. Imagine Canada stopping at the western edge of the Ontario border. And finally, Zealand Station. Now, Zealand Station is not the character that I'm, really jazzed about. It's Eldridge Eatman, who lived there, and it's a small community in New Brunswick. Now, Mr. Eatman was an athlete, and he started racing to win money to pay for the medical bills of his sickly sister. And in doing so, he became a Canadian champion and then the a world champion for Canada. He became one of the first world champions that Canada ever produced. The sad story is that when we went to find out more information about him at the New Brunswick Sports Hall of Fame, they had never heard of him. Finally, they did get more information to him, and he's in that museum, but thanks to us. But one of my favorite stories about him is that in an open race in Scotland that's still held today, he actually beat a horse in that race. So as I said, this ABC's kit is a toolkit that has 26 lessons featuring a person, place, or event of historical significance to our country. There are two 26 card decks within the kit, along with a teacher's text and a teacher's guide. The text really amplifies what's on the cards, and the guide provides answers, lesson plans, and supplemental activities for teachers. It actually even has 8 reproducible activity sheets that allow for teachers to be able to create dynamic activities with their students. And finally, there's a time poster that signifies the beginning of this journey that we've started to tell from 1628 and the arrival of Olivier Lejeune through to Dr. E. Melvin Duport, who was a professor at McGill for 70 years. We've also created a game called Making Connections. It's a matching and memory game, which has 24 of our stories, and the idea is you match images, and once you do that, it reveals a puzzle behind. And each one of the schools or community organizations or whoever buys one of our kits gets access to this online. So I want to thank you very much. If you have any more questions, please write me at lintondarner.gmail or phone me at the number below. You can also check out our website where you can both purchase the kit and as well you can contribute to our GoFundMe campaign, whereby we've been able to raise funds to be able to create our online presence with the memory matching game. But we hope to go further to be able to create more access for students and families across the country to what we believe is a very valuable resource. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Linton, for sharing more about the ABCs of Canadian Black History Kit. And thank you to each of you for tuning in this week. This concludes our RAWQ Talk series, but you are welcome to subscribe to our YouTube channel to take a look at past episodes and future content. For more information about the Regional Association of West Quebecers or to become a member, visit our website www.westquebecers.ca. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at West Quebecers.